Hi, welcome back to the front porch of my house on the Nicoloquay River north of Duluth. I'm Mark Munger, Duluth author. I read a little bit from my 2007 novel about race, Esther's Race, in the first installment. This second piece is from a work in progress. The entitlement of the piece is Slaying Dragons. It's an essay from my memoir in essays. The title of the memoir is Duck and Cover, Things Learned Waiting for the Bomb. And it basically deals with my growing up in Duluth, Minnesota, from moving here from St. Paul when I was very little until meeting my wife. So it covers the first portion of my life in basically stories and essays from my life. So this is called Slaying Dragons. Mostly true. I am standing on a fortress wall, sword in hand. There's a dragon on the loose, menacing the kingdom's villagers. I am not the king charged with protecting his subjects, but I am his knight, holding a crude wooden sword in my small hands. I am 7 years old, and already I am hailed as a great warrior. I remember very little of my maternal grandmother, Edna Marie Colby. I never heard her called by her first name. She was always addressed by her middle name. Grandma Marie died when I was 3.5 years old, so what I recall of her is now over 60 years distant. Memory, as the writing of this collection has proven, is a tricky thing. One minute, you believe you recall an incident, a place, a person in a certain way. You're positive in your recollection. Then a friend or a relative or reader peruses your story, finds a flaw, a memory that's artifice, not based upon actual circumstances. The few memories I have of Grandma Marie are like that. I do recall, when she was deathly ill, crawling beneath her bed in my grandparents' house in West Duluth, banging away at the bed springs with a toy hammer. I was trying to fix Grandma, or at least that's the shared memory Mom and I have at that moment in time near the end of Grandma Marie's life. I'm pretty certain I didn't attend my grandmother's funeral. In fact, I don't recall attending any funerals of any relatives or close friends of my parents or the like until I was an adult. Repressed trauma? Perhaps. But one day, Marie was my grandmother, and seemingly the next day, Nancy was. Grandpa Jack married widower Nancy Krantz when I was in first or second grade. That's the time frame for this story. Before they married, I spent time at Nancy's place in downtown Duluth. Nancy's apartment was a fourplex that she'd inherited from her first husband, built of brick, slanting towards St. Louis Bay on one of Duluth's vertically challenged avenues. Rent from the place was Nancy's main source of income outside a modest Social Security check and a meager stipend she earned fixing dead people's hair at Crawford's mortuary. Nancy had a parakeet, a bird that squawked loudly and pooped a lot and kicked bird feed out of its cage and onto the kitchen floor. But it never did anything or said anything profound. Due to traffic, I never played outside Nancy's apartment, though I do remember Nancy making me the best old-fashioned oatmeal I've ever eaten. After they married, Grandpa Jack and Grandma Nancy bought a small two-story Tudor on Vermilion Road in Duluth's East End. Grandma Nancy sold her apartment building. The house on Vermilion is where I became legendary as a knight of the realm. Up the block from my grandparents' new house, a stone castle, its tower soaring to the sky, overlooking Lake Superior, its walls solidly built, demonstrative of great authority and power, awaited investigation. While Jack and Nancy scraped old wallpaper off the walls of their new house, I was free to explore the neighborhood. It was during one such excursion when I unofficially earned my knighthood and the self-appointed title of Sir Mark. "Grandma," I said breathlessly, having just returned from an epic journey, "I killed a mountain lion." Grandma Nancy smiled at me, nodded as she made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. "That's nice, dear." "Really, Grandma? It was big and crawly and trying to break into the castle when I wrestled it and I snapped its neck." "Uh-huh," Nancy said, sipping hot coffee. "And where is this lion's body now?" I thought for a moment, between bites of sandwich, hoping against hope. She wasn't asking me to produce proof of my kill. It's at the castle." Grandma pondered my disclosure. "Don't you think you should bury it?" The idea had never occurred to me. "Sure," I replied, having never attended funerals as a child, including the ceremony laying to rest Bryce, my 4-year-old cousin who drowned at Minnesota Point. I was clueless as to what the funerary process entailed. Grandma saw me puzzling over her suggestion. "You'll need a shovel to dig the grave, and across to market," she said, playing along. "Grandpa Jack can help you with that." My maternal grandfather was a lot like my Uncle Willard, in that both men were handy with tools. But whereas Willard had a complete woodshop located in the basement of his motel, a retreat that included joiners and planers and bandsaws and drill presses, Grandpa Jack, an immigrant from Slovenia, was more of an old-world craftsman. I remember him building a doghouse for Deuce the First, my first dog, in the basement of his West Duluth house before Grandma Marie died. He cut all the lumber with a handsaw, used a hand drill to make holes for bolts and screws, and never, so far as I knew, used power tools during the process. That doghouse lasted through 4 or 5 dogs, a testament to Grandpa's handiwork. Grandpa Jack's workshop in the basement of the house on Vermilion Road was like something you'd expect Geppetto to labor in. There were jars filled with screws and nuts and bolts and other hardware lining a shelf above a wooden bench tucked into a corner. Saws and hammers and wrenches and pliers and screwdrivers and other hand tools, all neatly organized and arranged, hung on hooks above that workbench. I found Grandpa Jack working in his basement shop. "Grandpa," I said with seriousness, I need to borrow a shovel. I also need to make a cross for a grave." "Oh?" My grandfather wasn't one to pry too deeply. I killed a mountain lion," I explained, "at the castle. Grandma says I need to bury it." Grandpa nodded, left whatever project he was working on, likely another birdhouse for the backyard, found some scrap lumber, in short order nailed together a crude wooden cross. "How's that?" "Great! I'll need a shovel for the grave." He smiled, exposing teeth yellowed by age, coffee, the hand-rolled cigarettes he smoked outside Grandma Nancy's scrutiny. "There's one in the garage you can have, next to the service door." I don't think I dug a grave, but I do remember walking back up the hill towards the castle, cross in hand, finding a soft spot on the fortress's lawn, sinking the wooden shaft of the cross into the ground to mark the mountain lion's final resting place. Some time later, Grandpa made me a wooden sword to fend off the dragon I said was threatening the castle. "You were lucky with that mountain lion," he said, as he screwed 2 pieces of painted white wood together, the handle of the weapon wrapped with black friction tape to improve grip. "You'll need this if you encounter any other creatures or monsters." I nodded, accepted the sword with solemnity, climbed the basement stairs, and wandered out the back door in search of adventure. I don't remember if a dragon challenged me as I stood on the steps of Holy Rosie Catholic Church, my eyes fixed to the western hills rising to merge with the blue sky resting above the kingdom of Duluth. I do recall priests and nuns eyeing me with curiosity as they made their way to confer with the Almighty. I'm pretty sure those men and women of God felt safe, knowing that Sir Mark was keeping watch. Thanks, and have a great day. Enjoy this beautiful world.